Hi everyone, and welcome to the Slytherin Common Room. I'm very much Ravenclaw, but I do like the look of this, so we'll just use it for this video. So, Harry Potter star Daniel Radcliffe recently told Atlantic magazine that the rift between him and JK Rowling makes him really sad, ultimately, but that he would continue to support the rights of all LGBTQ people. This makes no sense. And all it tells me is that he's just another one of those vapid, virtue-signaling celebrity allies who love to cast that alphabet spell without even knowing their ABCs.
I'll never cease to be a champion, an ally, a spotlight, and a loving voice for all LGBTQ identifying people.
Most of my lifelong best friends identify as LGBTQ.
LGBTQQIAAP. No letter left behind.
Smart life. As a gay man, I wouldn't trust anyone with my rights who pushes that alphabet soup nonsense. Because behind all that rainbow glitter and all that talk of love and kindness lies an authoritarian, dementor-like movement that tries to suck the reality of sex out of life and dehumanizes us all. And Daniel, he's just being used as a cheerleader for this. He repeats the mantras, but he ignores the harms that are being done. And that takes a special kind of willful ignorance that I think deserves a closer look. So, in this video, we'll examine how he went from hero to gender clown, what he gets wrong and what he ignores, and if he's betrayed JK Rowling. Before we get into it, I'd like to invite you to join my Patreon or to support me via PayPal, so I can keep calling out all this gender nonsense. Links are below in the video description, and thank you so much to everyone who already supports me this way. Okay, here it is. Daniel Radcliffe and the Well of Willful Ignorance.
Trans women are women. Trans men are men. Non-binary is valid.
It all started so well. Daniel was cast as Harry Potter in 2000 when he was only 11 years old.
I think I'm a tiny bit like Harry, because I'd like to have an owl.
And over the next decade, he became world famous and a very, very wealthy young man. Joanne was very involved in the movies and was even a producer on the last two. After the release of the final film, Daniel interviewed her, and it's such a wonderful conversation to watch. They both see themselves as obsessive geeks, and the way they bounce off each other, finish each other's sentences, and make each other laugh, it is obvious that there is a special bond between them.
One of my favourite films is A Matter of Life and Death.
That's my favourite film of all time.
Oh, really?
There's also a real sense of gratitude from Daniel towards Jo, something that she tends to brush off by making jokes about it.
Anybody whose career was born out of Potter has to remember for the rest of their lives that we were all involved.
The rest of their life, they owe me big.
No, I think so. I agree. I think we do. Certainly owe a debt of gratitude, because I think no matter what we do for the rest of our lives, the chances are they are things where the opportunities we never would have had in the first place if we hadn't got Potter.
He also mentioned it at the premiere of The Deathly Hallows Part 2.
Every opportunity I get from now on all comes back to the fact that I got very, very lucky when I was 11.
And here's what she said about her lead actors when she took to the mic herself.
They cannot know how much I love them.
But less than a decade later, Daniel would throw her to the wolves more than once, simply for saying that sex is real. Which apparently put her on par with Voldemort.
I confess myself disappointed.
So, what changed? Or rather, who? To understand that, we need to go back to 2009, when Daniel started working with the Trevor Project in the States. The Trevor Project was founded as a suicide prevention charity for gay youth after a 13-year-old guy had tried to kill himself because of homophobic bullying. In 2010, Daniel said this in an interview. "I have always hated anybody who is not tolerant of gay men or lesbians or bisexuals. Now I am in the very fortunate position where I can actually help or do something about it." So at this point he's talking about gay men, lesbians and bisexuals and wanting to fight homophobia. A year later, the Trevor Project honoured him with a Hero Award. During his acceptance speech, Daniel talked about how much his involvement with the organisation meant to him.
Out of everything I have done, I can truly say the thing I am proudest of is my association with Trevor. It is an astounding organisation which saves lives every day, and I look forward to helping in any way that I can for the rest of my career. Thank you very much.
And this is the same year that he recorded that interview with Joanne. At one point, she mentioned the time that she first revealed that Dumbledore was gay. It was during a book reading, and there was a guy in the audience who, just from hearing her say that, got the confidence to come out himself right there and then.
One guy came out to his friends that night.
See,
he came down because I did a massive signing, and halfway down the queue, there's this guy standing in front of me saying, "I just came out!" And I said, "Congratulations!" And we hugged. Oh my God, Dumbledore! Oh my God! And then off he went, and I was thrilled.
That's amazing.
So, still no signs of a rift yet. A few years later, in 2015, Daniel was given the Straight Ally Award by the British LGBT Awards. Here's his video thank you message. Notice what group of people he refers to.
It is a huge honour to be named the Celebrity Straight Ally of the Year. It is odd and bizarre that I am essentially getting an award for displaying basic human decency in a sort of high-profile way. I feel like a wonderful thing about the future will be that there will be nothing remarkable about a straight actor saying, you know, that he supports gay rights in all their forms all around the world.
So, it was still all about the gays. But between around 2010 and 2015, many of the organizations that had originally been set up to advocate for the rights and interests of gays, lesbians and bisexuals shifted gear dramatically. And instead of campaigning on the basis of same-sex attraction, they started campaigning on the basis of gender identity. Why did they do that? Because most gay rights had been won by then, and trans was the next fundraising cash cow. So that's why Stonewall UK in 2015 added the T and trotted out a straight married man with a beard and a penis to go into schools and talk to teens about being a lesbian.
So you're curious about the beard, how?
Same story with GLAAD, the Human Rights Campaign and the Trevor Project, who became an LGBTQ organization. And so that's where Daniel started drinking the gender Kool-Aid. Around this time, the pushing of gender rule went into overdrive by politicians, the media, celebrities, medical institutions. Suddenly, it was everywhere. Anyone who questioned it was swiftly branded a bigot. And so the material reality of sex, one of the most fundamental facts of life, became the thing that must not be named.
We do not speak his name.
Another big shift was the focus from adults to minors. Suddenly we were told that there was such a thing as a trans child, and that if they didn't get medicated, they would kill themselves.
And there was a warning for parents too. Only gender affirmation could save them.
Parents who would say, it's my value system, it's my way of the highway, are the parents who will lose their children. And they will lose them either because that child will move away from home, or that child will kill themselves if they're trans.
I'd rather have a living transgender daughter than a dead son.
The Trevor Project ran with this in the most sinister of ways. It started arguing that putting kids on experimental hardcore drugs was suicide prevention. Daniel couldn't have fallen under the influence of a worse organization. He dutifully began to observe the gender proclamations.
Trans women are women. All identities are valid. Be kind.
Pronouns began to appear alongside his name, and he started speaking gender tongue, using terms such as queer and trans kids, and cis.
For people that are watching this video who are cis.
By the time JK Rowling joined the fray, his gender blinkers were firmly in place. And he had developed some serious blind spots, because that's what gender does. It dumbs you down.
I don't know what a woman is.
Let's have a look at some of his biggest blind spots. Blind spot number 1. Trans is not the new gay. I'd love for Daniel to tell me what putting a male rapist in a women's prison or halting a child's puberty has got to do with decriminalizing homosexuality or 2 men being allowed to get married. I mean, how are they the same? And this whole idea that the gays got their rights first and now it's the turn of the transes is false. From at least the 50s, the trans movement has very much had its own trajectory and its own goals. And they secured the right to change legal sex and therefore to get married in their new sex long before the gays got the right to marry, sometimes decades before. In Sweden, changing your legal sex became law in 1972, gay marriage in 2009. In Germany, it was 1980 versus 2017. In the Netherlands, it was 1985 versus 2001. And in the UK, it was 2004 versus 2013. But in the early 90s, under the leadership of Phyllis Fry and Martin Rothblatt, they started to strategize on how they could piggyback onto the activism of lesbians, gays, and bisexuals, while acknowledging that if they got their way, that eventually homosexuality, bisexuality, and even being straight would lose all meaning. Here's Joy Everingham, previously a straight married father, saying the same thing at Trans Pride a few years ago.
If gender is on a spectrum, then homosexuality doesn't really exist. Nothing to do with sexuality, and sexuality is redundant.
So no, trans is not the new gay. It's the new anti-gay. Which brings us to blind spot number 2. There is no LGBTQ community. Every time you use LGBTQIA whatever plus, you're lumping together different groups of people without there being any logic for doing so. I know it's nice to think that, but it's not true. It's a myth. But even if we were, then still, gay rights are not contingent on us signing up to gender rule, as much as some people would like you to believe so. So, Mr. Straight Ally, please stop making this about LGBTQ versus the world. Maybe first have a look at how the T is trying to reframe homosexuality to include those of the opposite sex. Which brings us to blind spot 3. The wholesale supplanting of sex with gender. Trans rights makes it sound like you're talking about the civil rights of a marginalized minority group. But that hides what gender is really all about, which is the political erasure of sex. And that affects a whole bunch of people, like everyone. Just look at the word woman. It's being redefined from a sex class to some kind of magical identity anyone can claim. And that has real consequences for how women can talk about themselves.
If you cannot talk about the fact that you've got a body, a female body, you won't be able to defend any of your rights. It's completely possible to undo not only decades of feminism, but hundreds of years of it.
And guess who saw that coming? If sex isn't real, the lived reality of women globally is erased. Erasing the concept of sex removes the ability of many to meaningfully discuss their lives. It also has serious political implications.
We are being forcibly redefined against our will and against our interests in a way that prevents us from being recognised politically as who we are and being able to articulate our own political interests, because our interests are not the same.
We've seen how this plays out over the last couple of years. Women have been arrested out of their jobs or even fired for simply talking about the reality of being female. In Scotland, women have had to go to court to defend that woman in law actually means an adult human female. Men are being placed in women's prisons and rape shelters. Men are competing in women's sports. Male sex offenders are reported in the press and recorded in crime statistics as women, whereas actual women are reduced to chest feeders, uterus havers, and people who menstruate. Again, guess who saw the dehumanization of that? People who menstruate. I'm sure there used to be a word for those people. And look how same-sex attraction has been redefined to same-gender attraction. How gay men are told that they better learn how to eat pussy. Lesbians are told they love dick and likened to sexual racists and anti-Semites for not wanting to include males in their dating pools who identify as lesbians. How they have to take legal action to defend their rights to even have their own public lesbian-only events without men who call themselves lesbians. And how one such a man is taking a woman to court because she won't allow him on a women-only app. She's had to fundraise more than $250,000 just to defend herself. Meanwhile, lesbians are being removed from pride parades for saying what a lesbian is and isn't, or attacked. And again, who gets this? JK Rowling. If sex isn't real, there is no same-sex attraction. So, Daniel, as someone who wants to fight homophobia, why are you okay with all this? Because all I'm getting from you is...
No offense, but I really don't care.
Okay, the next blind spot, number 4, kind of explains the previous 3. Gender is a colonizer's movement. The so-called core right that the gender movement is really after is to be able to identify into demographics of people that already exist within their own right. I think Jane Clare Jones explains it best.
No civil rights movement in history has ever demanded legal recognition as other classes of people who already exist.
Well, I think all we want is just to be recognised as the same as women.
Gay people never asked for recognition as anything other than being gay people. Black people didn't go around saying, actually, we're not black at all. And women's liberation was not about denying that they were female, it was about not being held back because they are female. But then trans comes along and says, we are going to identify into what you are, objectively, because of how we feel, subjectively. And that is not a human right. That is a colonizer's privilege.
And if you're going to do that, you really need to ask the people that you're trying to enter the class of whether they're okay with it. And if they say no, then maybe you should listen to them and not just demonize them as bigots and Nazis.
But as Dumbledore once said, such a no
is meaningless to those who've forgotten how to listen.
Number 5, transing away the gay. It is unbelievable to me how Daniel, as someone who says he cares about homophobia and young people, is so oblivious to the fact that we're once again medicalizing homosexuality, but now under the guise of gender affirmation. We know that same-sex attracted youths are vastly overrepresented at these clinics. Whistleblowers have rung the alarm about it for years. Research has shown how homophobia plays a significant role in these young people wanting to transition. The Cass Review points to it. And we have the stories from detransitioners who are now trying to pick up the pieces of their lives, but some with their wombs, breasts, penises, or balls missing. There's a fellow Dutch gay man, my age, who has been granted euthanasia because he couldn't deal with the trauma of what he'd been through.
Ik weet gewoon 1000% zeker, ik ben een homoseksuele man. Nou, daarvoor is dit een ramp wat er met mij gebeurd is.
Als ik tegen Gert zou zeggen van Gert, ik wil een einde aan mijn leven, dan helpt hij mij. Alleen ook dat is een hele grote stap en ook dat is weer onherroepelijk.
Would the Trevor Project even be able to acknowledge such suicidal gay men and lesbians? Or are they too busy pushing this new form of medical gay conversion?
You don't know?
I don't know, sir.
Clearly, fame isn't everything, is it?
You can see how these blind spots stop Daniel from being able to join the dots in a video that was recently published by the Trevor Project. He meets 6 young people, and at least half of them are on the puberty blockers or the hormones. So we have a guy, girl, guy, girl, but in gender tongue, a trans girl, cis guy, trans girl, non-binary person, trans girl, trans guy. The word gay is only mentioned 3 times in 20 minutes, and either in a negative way.
You know, why are you letting your kid, you know, play with dolls and dress up this way? He's gonna turn gay.
Or to say that they used to be gay, but now they're trans.
I'd say by the time I was like 14, I had came out as like openly gay.
I grew into myself as a woman and I accepted that. This is just who I am, and I came out as gay.
When this guy, who previously was an out gay guy, said that he realized he was trans and within a week got hormones.
And a week later, I started hormones.
All Daniel has to say is,
that's amazing.
No, Daniel, it's shocking. And how the hell do you get hormones in a week anyway? A week! He just goes along with it. Yay! When I listen to them, I hear 6 teens who struggled because they didn't fit in with sexist stereotypes.
I was a boy. I should like blue. I should like sports. I should be manly. I should like superheroes.
No, you don't.
I never associated myself with those things.
It just meant you weren't a typical boy, and that's fine.
Since I was like little, I was obsessed with like princesses. I dressed up as Cinderella for Halloween when I was like 3. And I just basically got the message that I shouldn't be who I was, and the things that I liked and the things I enjoyed were things that I should have to hide.
I grew up in like a very stereotypically Christian family.
Okay.
So like me telling my mom any type of me being different was like, oh my God, like literally she called my grandma and they prayed over me. I was like 7.
They could have said, hey, you know what? These stereotypes are shit. Fuck them. But instead, they try to jump from one to another, sterilizing themselves in the process.
I don't understand why I can't just decide that I'm a girl.
Because it's nature that acts as the sorting hat, something Daniel willfully ignores.
I'd love to hear from all of you why we can trust kids to like tell us who they are.
Okay, let's move on. Did Daniel betray JK Rowling? There's a quote from the Goblet of Fire that I think is very pertinent.
Dark and difficult times lie ahead. Soon we must all face the choice between what is right and what is easy.
It was against the backdrop of gender subsuming sex and the increasing vilification of women that Joanne decided to speak out. She could have easily stayed out of it and just swan around in her castle and count her millions, as some people like to imagine she does. But she chose to do the right thing, and in the most measured and reasonable of ways. So straight away they branded her a massive transphobe, and that's continued ever since, with articles saying that she's spewing transphobia and that her trans hatred is an eternal sin.
Well, that's hyperbolic.
It was 4 years ago, in 2020, that Daniel decided he had to put Joanne in her place, after he saw her now infamous "if sex isn't real" tweet. All she did was make the case that sex is real and it matters, that being female has a very real impact on how it shapes women's lives, and that it is not hateful to say so. And the other crucial point was that without acknowledging sex, you can't recognize homosexuality. What? Said Daniel. I must speak out against all these things. It's very Dolores Umbridge.
Things at Hogwarts are far worse than I feared.
So, 2 days later, he posted an open letter. Not on his own website, not on his social media. No, on the Trevor Project's website. Because he's just a
puppet on a string.
Did he address her points? Of course not. He just went, trans women are women. Any statement to the contrary erases the identity and dignity of trans people. I'm sorry, I'm struggling really hard to find the dignity in this man calling himself a lesbian, or this male double rapist being referred to in court as she, or this bloke smashing women's records. And then he basically says that Joanne should just, you know, shut up about it.
Professional healthcare associations have far more expertise on this subject matter than Joe or I.
I mean, what would she know about being a woman anyway? He also seems to have forgotten that just a few years before, they both very much agreed on the following.
The moment something can't be talked about is the moment it becomes a danger.
Yeah.
A few days later, Joanne published her essay explaining why standing up for women and girls means so much to her. But somehow, Daniel never felt the need to say something about that. Nor when the media demonized her, when she got death threats, when people showed up at her house or walked down the streets with signs like this. All we got from Daniel was silence. And that, as I see it, is betrayal. Of course, he doesn't have to agree with everything she says or things just because without her he wouldn't be where he is right now. But to not speak out about how appallingly she's been treated, even when he disagrees, that I find utterly reprehensible. And he may not level actual abuse at her, but there's a real passive aggressiveness to the way he talks about her. Like this comment in The Atlantic a few weeks ago.
I do look at the person that I met, the times that we met, and the books that she wrote, and the world that she created, and all of that is to me so deeply empathic.
As if she'd suddenly turned into this horrible, cold-hearted person. Again, it's very Dolores.
Pity.
But his betrayal doesn't end with Joanne. He's betrayed all women and girls. And the gays. The ones he set out to help back in 2009. Does he still know what a homosexual is? Does he now think that lesbians have penises and gay men vaginas?
Does he perhaps agree with Martine Rothblatt and Joy Everingham?
Homosexuality doesn't really exist.
And then there's the youth. The ones who don't fit in. The ones who are at their most vulnerable when they're lost and suicidal. And he's acting as the Pied Piper for the Trevor Project, who are only too keen to push them towards medicalization. Never mind all those systemic evidence reviews, never mind the WPATH files, never mind the CAS review.
Who all prove that Joanne was right all along.
Let's all sing along. Everybody get on the transition train now. Come on, children, get onto the blockers. Some people have asked Joanne if she thinks that Daniel owes her a public apology and whether she would forgive him or not. I mean, he won't, of course. Can you imagine? They would lynch him. Joanne said that she feels if any apology is due, it's to the detransitioners and the women and girls who rely on single-sex spaces. And the other day she tweeted this, talking more generally about, prominent celebrities beating the woo-woo drum, not specifically singling out Daniel.
My problem isn't with the jabs at me, it's with what they did on its own terms, choosing to be mouthpieces or champions for lobby groups pushing ideologically driven medical malpractice and embracing slogans and platitudes over evidence. When The Atlantic mentioned to Daniel that forgiveness wasn't a given, his response was,
I will continue to support the rights of all LGBTQ people and have no further comment than that.
End of story. Goodbye, the end.
Oh, Daniel. Okay, let's wrap it up. In Greek mythology, there is something called the Pierian Spring, which was the source of knowledge of art and science. But it was a peculiar spring. If you drank a little from it, you would become intoxicated and you'd have to drink a lot more to sober up again. So it came with a warning. A little learning is a dangerous thing. Drink deep or taste not the Pierian Spring. It's like Daniel only had a little bit and got drunk on gender, whereas JK Rowling drank deep. And that's why she's able to point out the bigger picture of what's happening. And if Daniel has shown us anything over these last couple of years, is that it's because of men like him that we need women like Joanne. Okay, that's it from me. Thank you very much for watching. I'm going to leave you with another great quote, and I shall see you in the next one.
But you know, happiness can be found even in the darkest of times, if one only remembers to turn on the light.
Thank you, Joanne,
for turning the light on full blast.
A woman is an adult human female.
Ciao!
Thank you so much for watching, and thank you to my PayPal and Patreon supporters. Because of you, I can make videos like this. Special shout out to my big spenders. Help Her Open, Mama Turv and the Turventines, Me Julie, The Lovely Mary, Julia, Dusty, Judels, Leffy, Dorothy, Wildfire, Esther, and Martha. Thank you.